Sarah Miller pushed through the staff entrance of the sprawling outdoor garden, her torn backpack slung over one shoulder, its frayed strap digging into her skin. The bright blue sky above poured sunlight across the manicured lawn, where white tents billowed gently, their edges adorned with crystal chandeliers dangling from sturdy oak branches. Red roses wove through a wooden archway, their petals catching the light like tiny flames. Sarah adjusted her crisp white blouse and smoothed her blue skirt, tucking a stray strand of brown hair back into her tight bun. Her heart beat a little faster than usual, not from the grandeur of the setting, but from the weight of the day ahead. She'd barely slept, her mind tangled in data science formulas from a late-night study session, and now she was here, serving at one of the city's most exclusive events. The manager, a wiry man named Greg in a stiff black suit, was already waiting, his eyes narrowing as she approached. "Today's Mr. Alden's engagement party, Sarah," he said, his voice low and clipped, cutting through the distant hum of arriving guests. "Big names, big money. Serve quietly, don't draw attention, and don't even think about outshining anyone. Got it?" Sarah nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line, and slipped her university notes, a worn notebook filled with equations, under the counter behind a stack of napkins. She grabbed a tray of champagne flutes, the glass cool against her palms, and stepped out into the crowd, her steps deliberate but light, determined to blend in. The garden buzzed with life under the clear blue sky, a sea of pastel suits and dresses mingling beneath the chandelier's soft sparkle. Laughter and the clink of glasses filled the air, mingling with the faint scent of roses and fresh-cut grass. At the heart of it all stood Cassandra Vale, her bold red gown a striking contrast to the softer tones around her. Her blonde curls cascaded over her shoulders, catching the sunlight as she posed for photographers, her smile radiant and practiced. Beside her, Ethan Alden stood tall in a light gray suit, his posture calm and composed, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with quiet intensity. He rested a hand lightly on Cassandra's arm, but his attention seemed to drift, taking in the event with a measured curiosity. Nearby, Emily Carter, Cassandra's best friend, leaned toward a guest in a pale peach dress, her voice carrying just enough to be overheard. "A billionaire and a goddess in red, honestly, could they be more perfect?" she said, her tone dripping with admiration but laced with something sharper, like she was staking a claim on the moment's glory. Cassandra tilted her head, her smile widening as she soaked in the attention, her gown shimmering with every turn. Ethan, though, remained steady, his expression betraying little beyond polite acknowledgement of the cameras flashing around them. Sarah wove through the crowd, her tray balanced expertly as she offered champagne to guests, her movements swift but unobtrusive. She'd done this countless times, blending into the background, serving without being seen, but today felt different. Maybe it was the scale of the event, with its glittering chandeliers and high-profile guests, or maybe it was the exhaustion from juggling her studies and double shifts. She paused near a table where a group of men in tailored suits debated an investment calculation, their voices rising with confidence. No, if you project the returns at 8% over 5 years, you're looking at a solid profit," one said, gesturing with his glass. Sarah, setting down fresh flutes, caught the error almost instinctively. She hesitated, then murmured softly, almost to herself, "It's closer to 12% if you account for compound interest correctly." The men froze, one pulling out his phone to check. After a moment, he looked up, surprised. "She's right. How'd you spot that?" Sarah offered a small, polite smile, her heart skipping as she realized she'd drawn eyes. "Just something I picked up," she said, moving on quickly, but not before Ethan, standing a short distance away, slipped off his sunglasses, his gaze locking onto her with a spark of intrigue. Cassandra, catching his shift in attention, felt her smile tighten, her fingers curling around her champagne flute as she watched Sarah glide away. Howard Grayson, Ethan's silver-haired business partner, stepped into the conversation near the table, his sharp suit and sharper eyes commanding attention. He'd overheard Sarah's correction and now fixed her with a curious look as she passed by with her tray. "Hold on, young lady," he said, his voice carrying a mix of challenge and amusement. "If you're so quick with numbers, let's say you're running that investment. How would you adjust the projection for market volatility? Sarah paused, her tray steady despite the sudden knot in her stomach. She wasn't used to being put on the spot, especially not by someone like Howard, whose reputation in finance she'd read about in her textbooks. But she met his gaze, her voice quiet but clear. I'd use a Monte Carlo simulation to model the risks, aiming for a conservative yield, say, 9%, while hedging with diversified assets to cushion any downturns. Howard let out a low chuckle, his eyes glinting with approval. Well, I'll be damned. That's not just textbook, it's practical. He turned to the others, gesturing at Sarah. This one's got a head on her shoulders. Ethan's interest deepened, his lips curving into a subtle smile as he leaned slightly closer, watching her. Cassandra, standing near a cluster of guests, gripped her flute harder, the stem threatening to snap as she caught the exchange, her confidence wavering under the weight of Sarah's unexpected spotlight. In the open-air kitchen tent, the pace was relentless, servers darting between tables and prep stations under the bright blue sky. Chef Marco, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with a chef's coat stretched across his frame, stood frowning at a misprinted wine pairing chart, his voice gruff as he muttered about the potential embarrassment. This could have ruined the salmon course, he said, tossing the chart onto a table. Sarah, dropping off empty glasses, glanced at the paper and spoke up before she could stop herself. Sir, if I may, the Riesling would pair better with the salmon than the Chardonnay. Its acidity balances the richness. Marco's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing, but Sarah held her ground, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her cheeks. After a beat, Marco nodded sharply. All right, kid, we'll try it your way. He called out the change over the speakers, his voice booming across the garden, and the guests responded with a ripple of applause, appreciating the seamless correction. Marco turned back to Sarah, his usual sternness softening into a rare nod of respect. Good call, he said, already turning to bark orders at the staff. Sarah exhaled, her tray lighter in her hands, but as she stepped out of the tent, she caught Cassandra's gaze from across the lawn. The red gown glowed like a warning, and Cassandra's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing as if marking Sarah as a threat. The garden's energy shifted as a new guest arrived, drawing every eye under the chandelier's sparkle. Professor Lane, a respected scholar in his 60s, stepped through the crowd, his tweed suit slightly out of place among the pastel elegance but his presence commanding immediate respect. His eyes scanned the guests, then lit up when they landed on Sarah, who was refilling a table nearby. Sarah Miller, he called, his voice warm and surprised, cutting through the chatter. My brightest student, what are you doing serving drinks? The guests around him turned, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Sarah flushed, setting down her tray to offer a polite smile. Professor Lane, it's good to see you, she said, her voice steady despite the sudden attention. The professor chuckled, turning to the crowd. This young woman aced every algorithm I threw at her, complex data sets, predictive models, you name it. She's destined for more than trays. Ethan, standing nearby, smiled broadly, his curiosity now fully piqued, his light gray suit catching the sunlight as he leaned toward Howard and whispered, she's full of surprises. Cassandra, a few steps away, felt her nails press into her palm, her red gown glowing but her confidence dimming as the professor's praise echoed. The guests' murmurs grew, some impressed, others skeptical, but all focused on Sarah, who shifted uncomfortably under the spotlight. Sarah started to respond to the professor's praise, her voice soft but clear. I just try to keep up with my studies when I'm not working, she said softly, meeting Ethan's curious gaze. The garden's chatter buzzed around them, white tents glowing in the late afternoon sun, but for a moment, it felt like just the two of them. Ethan tilted his head, his light gray suit catching the light. Studies? What kind? Sarah opened her mouth to answer, but Cassandra's shadow fell over them, her red gown blazing as she stepped closer. Ethan, darling, the guests are waiting, she said, her voice sweet but edged, her blonde curls bouncing as she linked her arm through his. Ethan nodded politely, but his eyes lingered on Sarah for a beat before turning away. Behind the dessert tent, out of sight from the crowd, Cassandra dropped her smile, her voice low and sharp as she pulled Emily aside. Did you see how he looked at her? Like she's someone important. She's just a waitress. Emily's eyes gleamed, feeding the fire. You're the star here, Cass. It's your engagement. Put her in her place. Cassandra's hands clenched, her red nails digging into her palms. She glanced toward Sarah, who was clearing plates with quiet efficiency, her brown bun catching the sunlight. I'll make sure everyone sees her for what she is, Cassandra said, her insecurity hardening into resolve as she smoothed her gown and rejoined the crowd. Ethan, meanwhile, had slipped away from the main group, catching Sarah near the garden's edge with an empty tray. He fell into step beside her, his voice gentle but direct. You didn't finish earlier. What are you studying? Sarah hesitated, glancing at the ground. Data science, she said, her voice steady but soft. Nights mostly, after shifts. Tuition's tough, but I'm managing. Ethan's expression softened, admiration flickering in his eyes. That's no small dream. Why data science? Sarah's gaze lit up, a spark of passion breaking through. Numbers tell the truth. They can solve problems, make things fairer for people who get overlooked. Ethan nodded, visibly moved. You're not what I expected, Sarah. From a distance, Cassandra watched, her champagne flute trembling, the red of her gown stark against the pastel crowd. Back among the guests, Howard Grayson caught Ethan, a teasing grin on his face. Careful, Ethan, you found a mind sharper than half our boardroom. The guests nearby chuckled and Ethan laughed lightly. She's something, all right. Cassandra, close enough to hear, felt her smile freeze, her heart pounding with jealousy. Emily slid up beside her, her voice a low hiss. She's stealing your spotlight, Cass. You need to do something. Cassandra's eyes narrowed, but she kept her tone playful as she turned to Ethan. Darling, why not have some fun? Let's test this clever waitress of yours. The guests would love a show. Ethan's brow furrowed, sensing the edge in her tone. Cassandra, I'm not sure that's necessary. She pressed on, her smile wider, drawing eyes. Oh, come on, it'll be entertaining. Let's see if she's as brilliant as everyone thinks. The crowd murmured, intrigued, and Ethan relented, his face unreadable, a flicker of unease in his eyes. Cassandra seized the moment, stepping toward the center of the garden, her voice ringing out. Ladies and gentlemen, let's make this celebration unforgettable, she announced, her red gown commanding every eye. Our talented waitress has impressed us all. Let's see if she can handle a real challenge tied to this engagement. The guests turned, their chatter fading, eyes locking on Sarah, who stood frozen near a table, tray in hand. Her stomach twisted, but Ethan stepped closer, his voice low. Don't be afraid, Sarah. Just show them who you are. Sarah met his gaze, his encouragement grounding her, and set the tray down, smoothing her blue skirt. Cassandra folded her arms, a smirk playing on her lips, her confidence masking the insecurity gnawing at her core. A small outdoor stage stood under the swaying crystal chandeliers, and Howard stepped forward, his tone neutral but challenging. Sarah, this engagement party's budget was a beast. Catering, florals, staff, all of it. If we had to cut costs by 20% without losing the event's impact, what's the exact amount we'd save, and how would you do it? The question was sharp, layered with complexity, meant to stump anyone without deep financial insight. The crowd leaned in, intrigued by the real-world stakes. Cassandra leaned toward Emily, her whisper venomous. She'll choke on this. Watch. Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing as the numbers flashed through her mind. Catering at $50,000, florals at $15,000, staff and rentals pushing the total to $120,000. Without a second's hesitation, she spoke, her voice clear and steady. You'd save $24,000. Cut the premium liquor package by half, negotiate bulk floral rates, and reduce overtime staff hours by 10%. The impact stays, guests won't notice the difference. The garden fell silent, then gasps rippled through. Professor Lane clapped sharply, beaming. Brilliant! Howard nodded, a grin spreading. Ethan's smile grew, his eyes fixed on Sarah's calm certainty. Cassandra's smirk vanished, her nails digging into her palm. A guest near the stage muttered, "She's sharper than our financial team." Whispers spread, some admiring, others envious. Cassandra's composure cracked. She stepped forward, her voice slicing through the murmurs. She's just a waitress. Budget tricks don't matter in the real world. The garden fell silent, heads turning. Ethan's gaze shifted to her, disappointment flickering in his eyes. Sarah stepped back from the stage, picked up her tray, and spoke evenly, her voice carrying across the stunned crowd. Sometimes numbers don't just impress, they expose what others try to hide. The crowd held its breath. Ethan stared at Cassandra, his face unreadable, while her trembling smile faltered under the weight of every eye on her. Sarah stood by the small outdoor stage, tray in hand, her white blouse and blue skirt a simple contrast to the lavish surroundings, her brown hair still neatly tied in a tight bun despite the day's chaos. She hadn't meant to turn the event upside down, but there it was, the truth laid bare in a single sentence. Cassandra took a hesitant step forward, her heels clicking sharply on the stone path, her voice breaking the hush with a forced edge of authority. "This is ridiculous," she said, her laugh brittle and unconvincing, echoing slightly under the bright blue sky. "She's twisting everything, making it seem like she's the victim here, like she's above all of us with her clever little remarks." But the crowd didn't rally to her side. Instead, a few guests exchanged sidelong glances, their expressions a blend of surprise, discomfort, and subtle judgment. One woman in a soft lavender dress murmured to her companion, "That was uncalled for, just loud enough to carry." Howard Grayson, standing nearby with his arms crossed, raised a silver eyebrow and leaned toward Ethan, his voice low but audible. "She's got a point, you know, Ethan. Numbers aren't just figures. They reveal character, intentions, the things people keep hidden." Ethan didn't respond immediately, his eyes still locked on Cassandra, the disappointment in his gaze deepening, like a shadow lengthening as the afternoon's sun dipped lower. Sarah, feeling the intensity of the moment, started to step back toward the tables, her tray feeling heavier in her hands. She'd said what needed to be said, and now all she wanted was to fade back into her role, to finish her shift and escape to her quiet apartment where she could bury herself in her data science notes. But Professor Lane's voice halted her retreat, warm and authoritative as he moved through the crowd. "Sarah, hold on there," he called, his tweed suit jacket slightly rumpled from the day's mingling. "You've done nothing but shine today, my dear. Don't slip away just yet." The guests turned their attention back to her, a wave of eyes that made Sarah's cheeks flush with a mix of embarrassment and unexpected warmth. She wasn't used to this, being seen, being appreciated beyond a quick thank you for refilling a glass. Professor Lane continued, addressing the group now, his voice carrying the weight of years in academia. "I've seen potential in many students over the decades, but Sarah here? She's exceptional. It's not just about solving equations or spotting errors. It's about seeing the world clearly, with honesty and insight." Ethan finally broke his silence, stepping forward toward the stage, his light gray suit impeccable despite the emotional undercurrents swirling around him. The crowd parted slightly, giving him space as he looked directly at Sarah. "That was impressive, Sarah," he said, his voice calm but laced with genuine curiosity. "You answered Howard's question about the budget cuts without missing a beat. How did you manage that so quickly? It's not every day someone rattles off exact figures like that, especially under pressure." The guests leaned in, their interest piqued, turning the tense moment into one of quiet intrigue. Sarah hesitated for a second, her fingers adjusting the tray's balance, then she met his gaze steadily. "I've had to budget my whole life, Mr. Alden," she explained, her tone soft but unwavering. "Every penny counts when you're paying for rent, books, tuition on a waitress's wage. You learn to see numbers not as abstract things, but as a map, a way to navigate what's possible and what's not. This event." She gestured subtly to the white tents billowing gently, the crystal chandeliers catching the sunlight, the red roses framing the archway like a picture-perfect frame. "It's lavish, sure, but the math behind it is the same. Cut the premium liquor by half, negotiate the floral rates, trim staff overtime. It adds up to exactly $24,000 saved, without losing the essence." The guests murmured in approval, some nodding as if her words resonated on a deeper level. A man in a tailored navy suit, perhaps a fellow executive, leaned toward his wife and whispered, "She's got a head for business, that one." Another guest, an older woman with pearls around her neck, added softly, "And Grace under fire, too." Cassandra, still standing a few paces away, felt the ground shifting beneath her. Her red gown, which had felt like armor earlier, now seemed too bright, too exposed. She crossed her arms tightly, her blonde curls falling slightly out of place as she tried to interject. "This is my engagement party," she said, her voice rising with a blend of desperation and defiance, drawing eyes back to her. "You're all letting her turn it into some kind of spectacle. She's here to serve drinks, not to play the hero with her number games and cryptic comments." The crowd gasped collectively, the air thickening with awkwardness. Emily, her best friend, hovered nearby, her pastel dress blending into the background, but even she looked uncertain, her usual gossip queen smirk replaced by a wary glance. Ethan's face hardened at Cassandra's outburst, and he took another step toward her, his voice low but firm enough to carry. "Cassandra, that's enough," he said, the words cutting through the murmurs like a command. "This isn't about stealing anyone's moment. You proposed the challenge yourself, remember? And Sarah met it, fair and square. Maybe it's time we all ask why that bothers you so much." The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear, her insecurity, her need to diminish others to feel secure. Cassandra's face paled, her lips parting as if to fire back, but the words caught in her throat. She glanced around, seeing the judgmental eyes, the subtle shakes of heads, and for the first time that day, she felt truly small. Emily reached out a hand to her arm, whispering, "Cass, let's step away," but Cassandra shrugged it off, her eyes glistening with unshed tears as she turned and moved toward the edge of the garden, her heels sinking slightly into the grass. With the confrontation diffusing, Professor Lane stepped fully into the spotlight, his presence steadying the crowd like an anchor. "Let me tell you a bit more about this young woman," he said, gesturing to Sarah, who stood quietly, her tray now set aside on a nearby table. "In my classes, Sarah doesn't just memorize formulas. She understands them, applies them to real problems. She's the one who stays late, asking questions that push even me to think deeper. And today, she's shown that same brilliance here, not for show, but because it's who she is." He paused, looking directly at Sarah with a paternal warmth. "You've earned every bit of respect today, Sarah. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The applause started then, tentative at first from a few guests, then building into a genuine wave that rippled through the garden. Howard joined in, his claps hearty, his grin wide as he called out, "Here, here." Even Chef Marco, who had been lingering at the kitchen tent's edge, stepped forward and gave a rare, approving nod, his strict demeanor softening for a moment. "You saved us with that wine switch earlier," he said gruffly to Sarah. "You're more than just a server, you've got instinct." Sarah felt a rush of emotions, gratitude, disbelief, a quiet vindication that warmed her from within. She wasn't used to applause, to being the center of attention for something positive. Her life had been a series of quiet struggles, late nights studying after double shifts, scraping together tuition payments, dreaming of a future where her mind could take her beyond trays and tips. Now, here she was, under the bright blue sky, with people who mattered seeing her for who she truly was. She managed a small smile, her voice barely above a whisper as she said, "Thank you, Professor. That means a lot." But inside, her mind raced with possibilities, the day's events planting seeds of change she hadn't anticipated. As the applause died down, guests began to approach Sarah one by one, their interactions brief but meaningful. The man in the navy suit stopped her first, his business card extended. "My firm deals in data analytics," he said, his tone professional but kind. "We could use someone with your quick thinking. Ever considered an internship? Or even a full role once you graduate?" Sarah blinked, taking the card with slightly trembling fingers. "I'm still studying, sir, but thank you. I'll think about it." Another guest, a woman in her 40s with a sharp bob haircut, added, "You handled that challenge like a pro. If you're looking for scholarships, I know a few foundations that reward talent like yours." Sarah nodded, pocketing the information, her torn backpack suddenly feeling lighter on her shoulder as she imagined the doors these connections might open. The sun continued its descent, casting a golden hue over the garden, the crystal chandeliers sparkling like stars against the deepening blue sky. The party was winding down, guests drifting toward their luxury cars parked along the winding drive, but the energy lingered, a mix of reflection and quiet chatter about the unexpected turn of events. Howard pulled Ethan aside for a moment, his voice low. "That girl's got potential, Ethan. Don't let her slip through the cracks." Ethan nodded, his mind clearly elsewhere, glancing toward Sarah as she helped clear the last tables. Cassandra, meanwhile, had retreated to a secluded bench near the rose archway, her red gown pooling around her like spilled wine. She sat alone, her earlier fire extinguished, replaced by an introspective silence. Emily hovered nearby but didn't push, sensing her friend needed space to process the humiliation, the exposure of her own insecurities in front of everyone. Sarah finished her tasks methodically, stacking glasses and folding linens, her mind replaying the day's highs and lows. She'd come here expecting nothing more than a paycheck, but now she carried something far more valuable: validation. As she headed toward the staff entrance, her backpack slung over one shoulder, Ethan intercepted her near the counter where she'd hidden her university notes earlier. He held out a small, elegant envelope, his expression sincere. "Sarah, before you go," he said, his voice gentle amid the fading chatter, "this is for you. It's information on a scholarship fund my family supports. It's not charity, it's for people like you, with real talent. Apply for it. I have a feeling you'll qualify easily." Sarah stared at the envelope, her fingers brushing against it before taking it. The weight of it felt symbolic, like a key to a door she'd been knocking on for years. "I don't know what to say, Mr. Alden," she murmured, her eyes meeting his. "Thank you." "Really?" Ethan smiled, a warmth in his eyes that went beyond politeness. "You don't have to say anything. Just keep pursuing those dreams of yours. Data science, right? The world needs more people who see numbers as stories, as ways to make things fairer." He paused, glancing back toward where Cassandra sat, her figure small in the distance. "And remember, sometimes standing up for yourself exposes more than just facts, it shows strength." Sarah nodded, tucking the envelope into her backpack beside her worn textbook, the pages dog-eared from countless study sessions. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, appreciated, not just as a waitress but as someone with a future bright enough to match the sunlit garden around her. As Sarah walked through the staff entrance, the blue sky above beginning to tint with evening hues, she took a deep breath, the scent of roses lingering in the air. The day had been a whirlwind of kindness, injustice, inner struggle, and transformation, just like the stories she sometimes read to escape her routine. But this one was real, hers, and it ended not with a fairy tale ring or a dramatic exit, but with quiet recognition that echoed in her steps. Behind her, the garden emptied, the chandeliers swaying gently, the red roses standing sentinel as the party faded into memory. Ethan watched her go, a thoughtful expression on his face, while Cassandra rose slowly from her bench, her path forward uncertain but forever changed by the numbers and the truths they had revealed.